Dear passengers, welcome to your flight with Zero G. Today's destination, the truth. Please stay curious and enjoy the ride.
Hello and welcome at Data Waypoint, the Zero G podcast where we speak about the role of data and AI solutions in the world of aviation. Today we talk about the topic of food waste, sometimes not that much present in topics around sustainability, where people think about engine optimization or flight path optimization or sustainable aviation fuels, but food waste is a critical element to reduce the carbon footprint of the aviation industry. My name is Manuel, and together with me today, I will be exploring this topic with Philip and Simon. Do you guys want to give a quick introduction into yourselves?
Sure. Thank you, Manuel. My name is Philip. I'm a data engineer here and engineering circle lead for about 2 years, mainly working in predictive AI and partially also in sustainability AI projects. Thanks.
My name is Simon. I've been working here for the last 3 years as a senior data scientist. I worked on multiple projects, including network planning, AI chatbots, and then, as you know, Tray Tracker for food waste.
Excellent. So really a broad palette of different kinds of value streams within the airline business. And then today, specifically, we will be talking about catering and using data analytics and machine learning to improve or reduce the impact of food waste in aviation. So maybe Simon, you can explain a little bit on the footprint or the negative impact of catering and food waste in the aviation industry. So why is food waste an important element?
For every tray that you see in every flight, this tray has passed through many stages to get to that point, right? And so from farming, producing the food, packaging, transportation, putting everything on the flight, right? And of each of these stages, you had a lot of emissions, right? And then in the end, the food, if like the tray, if it's not eaten, then this is food waste. So all
Was, for waste. And then to do regular, regulations, health regulations. Most of the food that is untouched, then it's thrown away, it's burned, right? So, and this causes also additional emissions. And so I was quite surprised when we were in the catering facility how much food is thrown, right? So anything that is on the tray, even if it's a jelly chart and it's sealed,
then it's thrown away. So everything, including not even just a tray. So the butter, the welcome bags for like that contain so much nuts, right? So those are all thrown away.
Wow. So basically, there's a lot of waste generated in the planning part where there is too much food produced for a certain flight. Then the food is transported, creating a lot of unnecessary fuel emissions. And then finally, if it's not eaten, it gets burned at the location or at the destination. The question is then how are airlines starting to think about making sure that there is clarity on where they're creating this food waste? So you mentioned Tray Tracker. What's the idea that lays behind this entire technology?
So you always know, for example, when what kind of trays or what trays you're putting on the flight, right? But we had a blind spot where we cannot know how much food is being wasted from each flight. So we wanted to know from each flight, for example, how many partially eaten, fully eaten, untouched trays are coming back, how much of certain additional items are returning, and to have an assessment. And maybe we can get a bit of insight and we can provide it to Lufthansa afterwards. So this is how we come up with the idea of the Tray Tracker. Of course, it was a collaboration between Zero G and then the catering team from Lufthansa Group. And then we used AI to get these insights.
Excellent. And so, how do you go about like, hey, we want to apply and use AI to collect data from catering, production, and planning and stuff like that towards actually trying this out in a safe environment?
Mhm. So we start step by step. So of course, the catering facility, they have their own processes. So we wanted to do our work without actually influencing or kind of introducing a lot of delays to their work process. It was a lot of communication and collaboration between us and them to make sure that we are allowed to take all of the data that we want to take. We started by building the Tray Tracker, having
a camera with a trolley that we can move it anywhere, something that is very flexible. And then we recorded a couple of videos to make sure that, okay, these videos are of good quality, and then they are not really interfering, or you're not seeing any people during the recording of these videos. And we started building small steps, small models that could work. And it was like this in progress. And then we start building one step on top of the other one.
Amazing. So you basically had a camera looking at a band where all the trays came out of the aircraft, analyzing each and every tray to see is this fully eaten, partially eaten, or not eaten at all.
Right. And this is basically in the washing belt when all the trays are coming from trolleys, coming back from flights, right? So you see all the trays coming in, and then we had directly the tray tracker next to the washing belt.
Making sure that no work progress or supply chains are disrupted. From an engineering point of view, the challenge must be really how do we integrate relatively quickly all of these like hardware components like a camera and GPU, as well as making sure that the application is running on the edge device. So from an engineering point of view, how do you make sure that we're building up an application that is not too time consuming and too time effective, but really making sure that we can build something up and try something out quickly?
Yeah, I think a key component here is the collaboration between the different parts. So you need the data scientists who develop the models. You need the data engineers who then build, integrate the hardware, build the pipelines, integrate into the cloud systems where necessary. You need to have the business data analysts who really see, okay, what's the business part here. So this is an important part, that you have a small team that's very well integrated and very trustful. And then early on start developing a solution that is robust enough so that you can use it in any place, especially if you have then untrained people to have to use this device, to have put it on a new band. They get like a few minutes of introduction how to place the device. Then it has to be robust enough to adjust itself and record still usable data. So this is a very important challenge, how to make sure that this works in an environment where it's very high time consuming and high pressure.
Absolutely. So you start from a business idea with a technological solution, then you quickly test it out in a live environment through a prototype and build a minimum viable product in terms of hardware where everything comes together. And then you prove the business value. I think that's a critical part here as well, to then actually start growing. And you already mentioned the topic of making sure that all of the expertise comes together. So how do we bridge the technological solution, collecting all kinds of data around what consumers or passengers have eaten from the tray, back towards having a better catering planning process to reduce food waste on the aircraft? So how do you bring those two elements together of technological solution with business impact?
Right. So it can be done in multiple ways. So for example, if you start from the menu, how the menu would look usually my tray, like, so we have contacts with the people that are planning or creating these maps. So you can start by going through all the data. You see that, for example, the dessert is not really
being very popular for a certain menu.
Okay.
Then you can just forward this information that maybe for this route, this dessert is not really popular. So it can start off a very small detail like this one.
Already at the planning stage of the menu.
Right, exactly. Another part could be the loading of the trays. So of course there's an AI in the background that there's a lot of teams that are working on AIs that can actually predict how much they need to load trays onto the plane, right? But there's nothing that checks if the loading is actually accurate, if they are really over-assessing or not. So once you check the results of the tray tracker, you can tell that, okay, we were off by 100 trays, right?
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, so we can check that part and then just forward it that maybe for this route, for this flight, the loading is a bit off, and then you're just wasting about 200 trays, right? So this part also is very important. And then maybe changing a bit of the actions that are being done on top of, like, on board. So, for example, anything that touch the tray of the passenger will go to waste afterwards if it's open or not open. So do we need, for example, to give a jelly jar for each tray, or it could be on demand only if they ask for it, right? So these small actions, they sound a bit simple, but in the end, they will make like really big difference.
And so how many flights did you try out in the proof of concept stage, and how many flights do you want to track, or the amount of trays you want to track when the application is actually fully operational and running?
So far we had two testing phases, one in Frankfurt, in Gate Gourmet Frankfurt, and another one in Munich. So we just started with the one in Munich. We are just actually checking the results from a new module that was just designed. So you can probably just calculate how many flights you would have usually passing through Gate Gourmet for 1 month, right? And we are, for Cont, we are checking all the flights. For Intercont, we are choosing maybe about 20 flights to kind of assess and see how the results are. Yeah. And so if we look at like airline caterings, it also changes a lot, like with consumer taste, right? So there are airlines who are always providing food on board, and you get a menu option like ABC, chicken or BC, vegetarian, obviously these days as well. And there are airlines using more and more predictive analytics to look at what do people actually buy on board. So with more and more airlines moving towards a buy on board kind of direction, how does that impact? How can predictive analytics actually help the buy on board decision making here as well?
Yeah, I think here that's the important part. It always depends a little bit on the customer. If you're an airline who is very price sensitive, then you try to reduce the cost that you have. So you try to make as much buy on board as possible and don't and you have different challenges here because you never know what your passengers are actually going to buy compared to the more premium airlines where you have to provide a certain amount of service. Predictive analytics here can help a lot because if you know information like where is your flight going, how many people are on that flight, what's the kind of people, is it more younger people, is it families, is it an early morning flight, is it a late afternoon flight, it changes the behavior.
Early morning, more coffee?
Yeah, early morning, more coffee. A lot of people might not have had the time to get some food on the way, so they want to have like a nice bread roll in the morning. So that's more important. On flights in the afternoon, they might want to have like an evening beer, so they sales for beer. Flights to vacation destinations, usually people are tend to be a bit more, we're going to start vacation, let's celebrate a little bit, let's get some food. On the way back, it's a little bit less. People don't buy as many, maybe they're overate during the vacation, so that's why they're a bit more hesitant. And this information is all there in the data that the airlines have. You just have to like dig for it and evaluate it. And this is the challenge, finding these gems in evaluating in all the data that is out there.
And if you look at the buy on board behavior of passengers and making sure that this is like communicated back towards the different various departments, like how do we as tech professionals and data analytical professionals bring that together? So really making sure that catering, procurement, people in the cabin, so cabin attendants selling buy on board items, as well as the catering providers, all work together to make sure that we're reducing food waste overall. Is that like a future dream, a future pipe dream maybe even, that will never become reality? Or are we on a journey towards data transformation in catering specifically? How do you guys perceive that?
I think we're very much on the way already, and with the people I talk from different airlines, they are really interested. They say, yeah, we want to know that. Right now we're using Excel spreadsheets with like data we extracted from last year's to make some kind of predictions. And they say, if you can give us a tool that's easy to use, and we can understand, okay, what's the prediction and how can we make use of it, they are really, really interested. And finding solutions that are really nicely and easily usable for people in the business, I think that's one of the keys here. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I agree to that point. I think finding something that is really does not really introduce a lot of change is very important, and then also having communication, spreading the word, right? So it's very surprising how many people are working on this topic. It could be in different stages, right? But you need to find these people and then just to kind of share results. So being open and then spreading the word that what you're working, what you're doing, and then what kind of data you want to kind of get it from another team. That's very important also. So, yeah.
Excellent. And we're mostly talking about now the topic of post-flight, right? So we're analyzing what did consumers, passengers buy on board, what did they consume in terms of buy on board analytics, so what did they buy at the point of sales, or more critically, what did they actually consume if an airline just provides them with a set menu. There is also the opportunity to be more proactive. So I was stuttering. We'll take out the stuttering. There's also an opportunity to become more proactive through hyper-personalization, so really asking and pushing towards passengers way before their flight starts. What kind of food do you want? What do you guys think is the potential of that from a logistical standpoint as well?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think if you do that, you're actually already saving a lot of food wasted, right? To know exactly what each person has a preference, to have a profile for a specific passenger, what they would like to eat, or let's say their tendencies or whatever. That's very important. The only thing is, it's in my opinion, it's always a bit hard to get this kind of data, right? So on something that is not related, for example, just going through the transcripts of the chatbot, of what the people talk to the chatbot or what kind of questions that they ask. Sometimes you know what they are asking about, right? But you cannot track directly who these passengers are. So it depends. If you have enough data from multiple sources and you can track it, then that's very good. But most of the cases you cannot really find data sources from that can give you the full picture, let's say. What do you think?
Yeah, I think like having more customer engagements through the airline's app is the really good part. Seeing, okay, you have your flight in your app because you want to board with your mobile boarding pass. Everything is currently like nice and easy. And then having a notification saying, your flight is in 2 days. These are the food options. Which one would you like? Can already like give some feedback saying, okay, maybe I want to have more pasta or I want to have more of the chicken. On that flight, so you have the reduced food waste while still keeping some variety. Because, to be honest, for most people, like flying is not something you do every day. That's something that you do once or twice a year. It's going to be an experience. You want to enjoy your vacation. So some kind of like a little bit of nice treatment is good. That's why I think going there and like, okay, today I feel more like beef. I want to have the beef. To still keep this option open while still having the opportunity to say, okay, you can customize your flight. Maybe you don't want to have the pasta, you want to have a low carb option. You can choose this before, and this makes it for the airlines a lot better to plan and know, okay, for this kind of flight we want to have a little bit more of this or a little bit more of that. So the interaction with the customer here becomes more and more important.
Sounds like data and AI in the catering area really has a lot of potential, both in terms of reducing food waste, improving the carbon footprint of airlines, as well as making sure that airlines are not wasting too much money on buying food that they're not going to use anyways, and making sure that passengers are delighted. Before we wrap up, quick question, tomato juice on the flight, yes or no?
No.
No tomato juice?
Never.
Never? My goodness. Me neither. Anyways, anyone who's drinking tomato juice on their flight, enjoy. We're looking forward to see you next time at the Data Waypoint. See you then.
So.
Bye.
Dear passengers, thanks for choosing Zero G. We hope you had a great and informative flight. See you next time.